how can prayer and scripture shape like the timing, the approach when you're looking to sell your business or just, transition in some of those ways?
We are probably at our best when we are, as believers, depending on God most. Again, God made us with the desire to risk and grow, and also a healthy fear is not a bad thing, right? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Welcome, everyone. Hey, today I have an amazing guest, a dear friend of mine, Jay Mink. He is a man that wears many hats, and I've got to read off his little bio because there's just too much there for me to memorize. But Jay, he built and led Cognition, which is an award-winning branding and marketing agency serving nonprofits and global brands. He's brought that ownership experience into mergers and acquisitions, setting records at Benchmark International as a senior director. Now he serves as director of outreach for the National Christian Foundation and in the Carolinas, guiding generosity at life's biggest transition points. He is a true activator, a connector, a catalyst, using his gifts to create both earthly and eternal impact. Jay lives in Charlotte with his wife, Ashley, and his 3 kids, and he serves as an elder at Uptown Church. Jay, welcome to the Guidelight, brother. Finally we're doing this. We've talked about this for a while, and so I'm excited to have you on and us connect on some things. How things going in your world?
Great. I mean, wonderful. Excited to be here. Always a joy when you and I get to chat. So yeah, love it.
Cool. Well, we want to jump right into this because, today's topic is going to be about Christian business exit strategies. Here at the Guidelight podcast, we're faith-based, and so it's here to help people that are looking at different strategies in their business, whether they want to sell or just grow and be more profitable. But this is, pertaining to business exit strategies. And so one of the things that I wanted to just ask you, because you've had a lot of experience in this, is from a biblical perspective, kind of like when you think about a Christian approach to an exit strategy, like what biblical principles guide you first?
Well, I hate to take it the easy route, but I would say that all of our guiding principles in life, regardless of whether it's in business, in family, in finance, in an exit strategy, all fundamentally beneficial principles are tied back to biblical principles. I mean, the founding of our country, right? A lot of what we have today that we appreciate and recognize as good are tied to Judeo-Christian underpinnings. So, when it comes to an exit, I would say that there's actually a lot more that you can derive from biblical principles for a successful exit than what you might think at first blush. So, I'm not sure there's one out there that's like, oh, here's the silver bullet. But so many biblical principles come into play when you're going through an exit. You've been through them. You've acquired businesses before, Jason. I know that. You sold. And so you can speak firsthand to the fact that it's a long, arduous process, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of emotion, a lot of risk and reward at play. And, it literally will draw on every facet of your arsenal in terms of intellect, EQ, and character to get through it, and not only just get through it, but get through it well. So biblical principles really inform all those facets.
Yeah, I would agree, because there could be so many distractions, like you said, the emotions and the variables that are at play, that it is the whole encompassing of our Judeo-Christian faith that comes to bear. And I think one of the great things, and you've done this a lot in your career, is helping other people's and just being that sounding board as they're going through that. It's, that's, you need that. It's like iron sharpens iron. That's kind of what we're called to do. So that's great.
But I guess, to that question though, and it's a really good one. I think there's a lot of folks that would check the box and like, I'm a Christian, like I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm seeking to follow Jesus in my life. And yet, guys are especially, I'm pointing, anytime I start being prescriptive, it's me, okay, can be good compartmentalizers.
Yeah.
And so, we can struggle with leaving a lot of things that we hold dear in one facet, like, our faith, And we can compartmentalize that and leave it at the door when we go into the office. Now, not to say that that's the way you want to operate,
Right.
but that can be true. A lot of really faithful Christians that have run businesses for a long time, and God has blessed with growth, that then exit the business and they're thinking about estate planning and legacy and inheritance for their kids. Well, they can very quickly be more influenced than they should from worldly wisdom of, well, here's how you approach legacy planning. Minimize taxes, pay as little tax as possible, and give as much money to your kids as possible. That would be worldly wisdom when it comes to estate planning. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with that, it doesn't at all factor in, well, what is God's, plan? What do we see modeled out over the full arc of Scripture? What is going to constitute a blessing and not a curse? And so that same kind of disposition can come into play when it's time to exit. How do I think through my exit and my approach and my behavior through it and my vision for it and my vision after it? How do I incorporate, who I am as a believer and what the Bible has to say about life into that particular process?
Yeah, that segues kind of the next thing I was, when you're talking about when you talk about the Bible, like with faith-based decision making, how can prayer and Scripture shape like the timing, the approach when you're looking to sell your business or just transition in some of those ways? So how has that come in for you and just people that you've counseled and stuff like that? Just the whole prayer and Scripture, like where does that come into play?
Yeah, well, great question. I think that we are probably at our best when we are, as believers, depending on God most.
Yes.
And that can be challenging for business owners. I'm a recovering business owner. And so, I have been and can be type A, hey, I want to get it all done. I'm hard charging. I've got an objective. I'm going after it. And I can run out in front of God and ask him to just kind of I'll say the right things in prayer, right? Hey, your will be done. But really what I'm about is God, here's my plan. I'm going after it. And I just want you to bless it, protect me from the pitfalls and bless my agenda. So, from a thinking about an exit standpoint, I think biblically, right? It's being actually, literal and your will be done. God, I really want your best, for me, for my family, and for this business that you've created. It's not my business. I tell folks all the time that are business owners, hey, when you die, do you get to take this business with you? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe it's not yours to begin with, right? Maybe you're a steward of it and a manager versus an actual owner.
Right.
Right. So, with that mindset, approaching the Lord and asking, hey, what is the right timing?
Yeah.
We can be pretty quick to assume that we know the right answer.
Yeah.
We can be pretty quick to assume that, now's the right time because of X, Y, and Z. And usually the things that are influencing timing are, if you really are honest about it, it's usually going to fall into two camps. One is fear. What if I miss the opportunity? What if things fall apart? What if the team I've assembled to look attracted to a buyer leave? Those sorts of things. So it's fear-based, or it's, pleasure-based, right? Ooh, I really want to strike while the iron's hot. The valuations are up. I want to get that. And so, again, God made us with the desire to risk and grow, and also a healthy fear is not a bad thing, right? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Exactly.
And so back to the question, it's hey, am I really surrendering this to God and asking for Him to give me a vision of what the right timing is? But I will say this, that if you never have a plan, then you're going to hit the target every time. Right. So starting to think about an exit is super beneficial. I think more times than not, unfortunately, a lot of privately held businesses in the lower mid market, so maybe like under 50 million in deal value, they are doing great business, but they're not necessarily doing it for an exit.
Right.
And an exit is inevitable.
Yes.
Like that business will be sold at some point. That's the reality. And so to avoid that or not think about it or plan for it, just kind of puts you at a disadvantage.
One of the things you mentioned it a minute ago when we're talking about buyers. And so a lot of people ask me all the time, well, how did you decide who the right buyer was? And I just give you a little perspective on me. Like whenever we looked to part, I wasn't really necessarily looking to sell, but this group I was with, they were looking at folks, and there's a lot. Like I think there's like 13, like 12 of the 13 was like no, because you're just trying to discern who's the right fit to carry on the legacy, like for my clients, my people. And I'll tell 2 quick little stories about how it helped me discern on partnering with our great company High Street. Was one of the executives. We were eating breakfast one morning, and you just saw what was important to him. He said, I remember him sitting there, and we're just chatting about life and talking about kids. And he said, there's really only a few things in life that are most important. He said, it's, your personal health, like staying healthy, and like, and your kids, just wanting your kids to grow up well and be safe and just be thriving. And then just faith, just having faith in God and just letting that be the driving principle. And it was just like, and what's great about that is we saw that permeate throughout all the leadership with where we are, with who we decided to go with. And so I think, like, what are some other tactics? Like, what have you seen other people when they're trying to discern who's that right buyer? Like, that was just a casual conversation. That wasn't even in the sales pitch, but that was one of the things that struck me. But what would you say to that? Like, how do people discern through that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that one of the things that folks can lack is a vision for the business beyond them, right? Especially a founder. So if I start something, it can be hard to have big picture strategic vision for the business after I'm gone, per se.
Right.
So, that would be something that would be helpful to think about prior to meeting buyers. What could this business look like? Where could it go? What are the missing pieces or ingredients that I don't, hold within me or within my ability to bring into this business? And so you're going to look for those strategic fits. I think that's really helpful. So you want to find a buyer that's matching up with that. I think when a business owner is going into and open to or actively pursuing a transaction, whether it's a merger or just an outright exit, having a broker, a representative, somebody that's been through this process many times before is key, because one, it's the biggest transaction of their lives.
Yeah.
And if you're selling to a repeat purchaser, and they're all over the spectrum in this regard, but they can be a professional buyer. Right. And that's going to really disadvantage that seller who's never sold a business before. Maybe they had one transaction. That's very different than somebody that's had, tens or hundreds of transactions.
Yes.
And what the seller is usually prone to do is they want affirmation and confirmation that their baby's beautiful. Yeah. This has been their love child, right?
Yeah.
And and guess what? Buyers know that, and it is a courtship. They are courting this business owner, and so having or being able to maintain perspective in that dance, in that interaction, is really helpful to kind of pierce through what is just good window dressing. So like strategic vision for who would actually constitute a good fit versus like whoever's coming in and saying the right number. That right number isn't necessarily always the best fit. Having either you're in yourself or hopefully you're, the Bible says that, hey, to wage war, you need many advisors. So having an advisor that's walking alongside you, but not emotionally a part of it, is really helpful to maintain perspective. And then I would say too, in interaction, probably like you experienced when you were at that breakfast talking about life. I bet you it wasn't just that he said the right answer, but that gutturally in your spirit, you were like, wait a minute. And I like to say Holy Spirit recognizes spirit.
Yes.
And so you can make those connections, and it is on this transcendent spiritual, like I can't really explain or articulate why, I just know this to be right. It's kind of like getting married. And that's probably for a lot of sellers, that might be the best analogy, right?
Yes.
You just know. And you can be talking to your kids about that phenomena, but until they experience it, they won't understand the just knowing it thing.
Right.
And so again, if we're being open-handed, if it's God's business, if I'm seeking God's will, if I'm God advisors around me that are helping me maintain perspective, and that does allow me to listen with my spirit a little bit on like, is this person a right fit or a wrong fit? And I've seen, and you probably have too, folks that have, and I've done it in my own life. Like, God's like, hey, do this. And I choose to ignore it. Or he's like, hey, don't do that. And I choose to ignore it. And so that's another challenge that can really come back to bite you. Hopefully we're not, choosing to ignore when we sense the Spirit leading us one way or the other.
Right. Right. I know one of the things, when we're talking about the buyer, and even on the post side, for me, one of the things that was really important, because I spent, 20 years building this culture, building, communities, we're in multiple communities, giving back, just doing a lot. And people, I was concerned, like, is that going to stay? Like, what do you see and how, like, what are some of the things to just consider when making sure your kingdom legacy that you've built up for, decades doesn't just vanish where, someone comes in and says, well, that's not really important to us, that, we're looking for profits, not, giving back in the community. And I know for me, because you can ask it and like you said, people say, oh yeah, we're going to keep doing that. But then sometimes that doesn't always happen. And we were blessed where that's part of their DNA, that they're very community based, and that helped me. But what are some experiences you had, or what are some tips or thoughts around how do you protect your kingdom impact post sale?
Yeah, great question. On that alignment question, obviously one way that you can do it is to talk to other founders that have perhaps sold to this group previously. And, if they did a rollover situation where they're still in the business after the transaction, like hey, would you mind me talking with some of those people? Would you mind introducing me? Like, man, you can get to a lot of insight really quickly. If they're adamantly opposed or saying the right thing, but somehow those introductions never come, that might be a red flag.
Right.
The hard reality of that question is, you try to be a faithful steward of what God's given you, like in your situation, for example, to the best of your ability. But once it's all done, once you fulfilled the transaction and signed, right, you really have no control. So there is no guarantee that they're going to continue to exercise certain things that you took as dear and incorporated into the fabric of your business. So like ultimately, unless you've like, I was about to say even structured it into the deal, but even then, like, we know that unfortunately deals are broken. I guess that's why there's lawyers in the world. So, there's really no guarantee, but I think, again, going back to really having good advisors, having sound judgment, spending lots of time talking with other folks that they've done deals previously. Like, those are the things that are going to help you assuage concern and hopefully have, the company set up for continued or continuity of, belief or impact post-transaction. Because like in at the end of the day, we just don't have a ton of control after it's all said and done.
That's right. And this kind of leads into my next question. it comes with finances and purpose. I mean, this is right up your alley. So this is teeing you up because, you and I, this is how you and I connected with the National Christian Foundation, was thinking about the principles to help Christian entrepreneurs steward the sale proceeds, in a way that honors God. And if we want to honor God with our finances, and especially with the sale, I mean, that's, you were a big help with me, and still are, as we talk about these things about generosity and honoring God and, with the sale proceeds. But so speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, well, a pretty simple biblical principle is, what do I have that hasn't been given to me? Now that can rub me wrong as a hot-blooded American, or a business owner, an entrepreneur. Well, I worked hard and created. Yeah, that's true. But like the functionality of my legs to stand up when I swing them out of bed in the morning, that's a gift from the Lord.
Yes.
The breath of my lungs, a functional brain, like all those sorts of things, right? And so when it comes to, you think about this, for most business owners, 80 to 90% of their entire net worth is tied up in that business. Yes. And for most business owners, at partial or a full exit, one of, if not the biggest transactions of their lives, where all of a sudden a bunch of liquidity is achieved. And money, the Bible doesn't actually say that money is an idol.
Right.
I think that more appropriately, money reveals where our idols are, what our idols are. And so, the one of the things that I find really helpful as a believer is not just to join the Lord in what He's doing, to recognize that, I'm a steward of all the wealth in my life that He's given me to manage on His behalf.
Right.
But to also continue to exercise generosity and open-handedness as a spiritual discipline that helps me stay on the path of following Christ versus building my own little kingdom. My proclivity and bent is in my flesh to go build my own kingdom.
Yeah.
And that can become more pronounced after a large transaction. So it's really a good thing to engage on thinking about and employing some giving strategies in conjunction with the sale that help me to kind of maintain my balance, and live out my faith the way I've been thinking. And one of the ways you can do that is, like, if you're going to, let's say, tithe on the sale. Yeah, I'm going to tithe. I'm going to give. Well, then there's ways that we at National Christian Foundation help folks explore the potential of making a gift of part of their business interest prior to the sale versus after. If you're going to give, if that question's already answered, then the next important question is, well, when does it make more sense to give, before a sale or after? And a lot of different factors can go into the answer. There's not a one size fits all.
Right.
But oftentimes you can have considerable tax efficiency realized by giving before the sale.
Yes.
What that ultimately means is you're just moving dollars out of the tax bucket and into being able to be more generous, into a donor advised fund.
Right.
That's ultimately going to go to your favorite ministries. And that's pretty cool. And really, going back to stewardship, that's just good stewardship of the IRS tax code.
Yes.
So that's what we help folks.
Yeah. Take advantage of that. That was so eye-opening when you and I discussed that and walked through that principle. Is just like, and again, that's why you need to surround yourself with people wiser than you when you're doing a transaction like this, because you get great bits of information like that. One of the things I so much of stuff when we talk about transition and exits, just because of my journey, and you and I've talked about this, but I've always wanted to, as a Christ follower, I'm always talking about my witness, my testimony. And so it was real important for me to try to make sure that when I sold my business and whenever I transitioned, with our national partner, it's still like a merger. I mean, I'm still in it and everything, but like wanting that to become a testimony that I could be proud of, but also translate with my employees, with our clients, just trying to find that good, of how it's a good thing in the community And that was real important to me. And we were, like I said, I think we were very fortunate in how we did it, but like sometimes that's a challenge. And like, what are some ways that you've seen people really strengthen that testimony and witness to their peers, their employees, their communities, their clients, those things when you're moving through a cell?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that there is one particular route to go through that's going to be the right way. I will say that you're going to be around, like if you were a believer and you were living that out in front of employees and teammates, over the years, then the way you handle yourself through the largest transaction of your life is going to speak volumes for the veracity of your faith, right? That could make or break a witness,
Yes,
in terms of how you handle it. And so I would say, yeah, I mean, it's a huge opportunity for witness. It's a huge opportunity for the enemy to attack Christian witness, and dissuade people away from the faith. And I think too that it's a really more than just like doing it well, is wanting to care for other folks well in the process. You can do that, right?
Yeah.
You can have lots of different aspects of a deal structure or the terms, take care of key employees that have been instrumental in helping build the business and being kind of combatants in the foxhole with you over, the long, hard slog. And so, I had a gentleman who owned an electrical company, and he NCF giver. We were looking at him making a gift ahead of a transaction, and great guy, salt of the earth kind of a guy. And he literally just like kept praying and thinking about, and he came up with a number. He's giving cash to his employees, sizable amounts to key employees that have been there a long time. And that's not part of the deal. He's just doing it off the top of the proceeds of the business. There's no tax advantage to it, but that's just something that he was called to do. I'm like, that's really, really cool. I think that we can get caught up in trying to get a deal done. There's a certain tipping point. It's almost like, well, I've waited 10 minutes for my lunch appointment to show up and the guy's still not here. And, well, I might as well wait 5 minutes. You kind of get sucked in, boiling frog in water scenario. And that happens in the M&A process too. Due diligence can be long and arduous.
Yes.
And so it's a challenge again that I don't think we're meant to maintain on our own. We probably even can't. That's why we need to be in community with other believers that we can share stuff with, and have this advisory cadre that's walking alongside me, helping me think about it. But if you go and you're really trying hard to live out your faith in your dealing, live out your faith through picking the right buyer versus the highest number.
Exactly.
Live out your faith through structuring a deal that's going to be a blessing to the folks that are going to remain in the business. Live out your faith by exploring ways to be really generous, ahead of the transaction. I mean, all of those things I think can, support the things that you hopefully have been espousing for years that they know, and have seen and have heard in your life. So that would be kind of my recommendation in there.
Yeah. Well, I know we don't have too much more time, but I got two more quick questions I want to kind of wrap us up with. But like, and you may have already spoken to some of this because some of us, we're talking about kingdom impact. We've talked about it from the giving, but what are some innovative ways you've seen entrepreneurs channel exit wealth or freed up time into kingdom building work? And I love that second part, because a lot of times we think of selling, people think of the money and they talk about, the wealth, but the freed up time, I think is huge. I've seen that with people I've worked with and myself included, of what does that mean for the kingdom and the impact that, people can have?
Yeah, great question. So, I've never understood the idea of like retirement.
Yeah.
Like, let's just be frank, it's not biblical,
Right.
Like the
Yeah,
American
and I agree on
model
that.
of retirement.
Yes.
I'm working really hard for all these years, and then now I'm going to play, and I'm unencumbered by any responsibility, and it's all about me. It's like,
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now,
God corrected me. I shared that. God corrected me really quick on that as I started to kind of go down that path a little bit. And God's like, Jason. I was like, yes, Lord. It's all you.
maybe you need to tell us how, but I do think that there are different seasons of life.
Yes.
And that's okay. Right. And so, things sneak up on us and they sneak down on us, right? As we're getting older, things like, our affluence, our influence, our like business opportunities, all those things, increase, and in a way that you don't really recognize. You're like, oh, wow, I've got a lot of investment opportunities, a lot of opportunities to, a lot of invites to be on boards or whatever. And so it's important to kind of understand the lay of the land there, in things that are, increasing for us as we get older. And then things decrease as well. Things sneak down, like motivation or energy.
Right.
And just recognizing, like, if you're a 78-year-old, who's selling a business, well, hey, part of the vision might be really taking us, like, downshifting here. That's okay, right?
Exactly.
Like, that might
yes.
be really good. Like, be present for the kids and the grandkids. Like, that's noble work right there, right? And so, but I think the biggest challenge is, to a lot of folks, all they know is business. Like, their heart and soul has gone into that business, and a lot of work. And unfortunately, again, pointing the finger at myself, that can become identity.
Yes.
And if their next business objective is to have a successful exit, and they haven't really taken the time to seek God's heart and what He's calling them into in the next season, and haven't had given them the allowance to daydream about what that might look like, then they're really setting themselves up for difficulty in the next season. And I've seen a lot of business owners very despondent after an exit and a sale and a retirement, if you will, and depressed. Golf, I don't care how much you love golf, right? Playing every day, at a certain point, the balloon is going to fall off, right? It's going to be like, well, this is just another day of course.
Oh yeah.
And so, like, having your identity and purpose tied to something greater, that's important. And that work really should, the benefit of doing that before and during is more important than waiting till it's all said and done and then it catching you out. So
that segues right into this last question. Sorry to interrupt you, just because you're going down this path, and I just wanted to kind of tie it up with this is finishing well. So, you're looking at that and you're planning for that. Like, so what's your encouragement for believers who want to end their business chapter in a way that glorifies God, but also, like, brings them fulfillment to where they're not falling into that trap of that lie of, oh, I'm just going to go be all about me? Because like, I've seen a lot of business owners that get into, like, this fresh wind comes into them. You see them come more alive in these new next chapters that God has for them. And like, it's very invigorating. So, how do you finish well?
Yeah. Great question. There's about 100 characters in the Bible that we can track the lifespan, the entire lifespan, to be able to discern, did they finish well or not?
Right.
And of those 100, about 20 of them finished well. So I just share that because I think my proclivity is that, well, if I'm in a room full of people at a party, someone tosses a grenade in, well, I'll make it out okay. And the reality is, with biblical context, that finishing well is not easy.
Right.
And so I think that finishing well, if you really want to finish well, then the first step in doing that is in humility, grasping, you know what? This might not be the slam dunk. I might not have the inner resource or life experience to finish well. on my own. And so just having a disposition of being teachable and humble and recognizing the pitfall, I mean, that's probably more than anything secret ingredients to finishing well. Again, and that I think just goes back to like, am I seeking the Lord? Am I, working for him, or is he working for me? Do I recognize that, I'm prone to wander, and then I think also too, it probably requires thinking through, what does finishing well mean? And when I talk about finishing well, what am I defining that as being?
Yes.
And so for somebody that's doing a rollover like you did, where you've got, a position in the next iteration, like, that's interesting to see. Like, I'm going to steward this up to this point in the next chapter. That's, something that you got to really think through and understand what that's going to look like.
Yeah, that's great. And it, like I said, there's so much, you and I we could sit here and talk. And here's the great thing, just for our listeners out there, is we're going to do a 3-part series with Jay. And so there's so much that when Jay and I get to talking, I was like, we can't do this in 20, 25 minutes because there's just so much. And so if you like what you're hearing from the Guidelight and from Jay, hit like, hit subscribe. You'll be notified, because we're going to do a 3-part series. So I think it'll be real exciting. And Jay, I just want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. You're a dear brother. We say a brother from another mother. We just
there you go.
Appreciate your time.
Right. Well, it's an honor to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, hey, you have a great one. Until next time, we'll see you.